Hi, this is Scott Kay from Integrity Plus Accounting, and this is a video that I've called Getting the Most Out of Life. So what I want to do is talk about a number of areas that I get a lot of questions from my clients, and a number of things that I wish had been told to me when I was a young guy before I made all these mistakes for myself and all of these learnings. So we've got 6 parts here: mindset, career, property, business, investments and super, and family and insurance. So let's kick off into mindset. I believe that taking action is one of the most important things you can do. Of course, there are things you want to do before you take action. You want to be prepared, but people with a bias for action get results. And the reason is the more that you take action, the more that you can iterate, close the feedback loop, and create something that works. I was heard a story about a plane in the war, and what they ended up doing is just having all the 3 groups of people, the engineers, the people who are building the plane, and another group of people all together in the run tent, and then they were able to they were able to build a plane much faster by closing the feedback loop, by trying something, by testing it, by working out what actually works. The next thing, do it to 80% and call it finished. This is what I love, just getting the job done. You heard there I had a stumble on my words. I've just left it in the video to just get the job done, because you don't care about that I stumbled over saying quickly. You care about the process. You care about the information. You care about getting the results. And results happen from finishing things, and finishing things happen from finishing the right things. And of course, getting only what needs to be done. And sometimes that means just getting it to 80%. Ready, fire, aim. As again, you can close the feedback loop. Education is key, and it always costs. Education and learning will always cost in time, money, mistakes, or opportunity. And even though money can be an expensive way to pay for education, in some ways it's the cheapest, because it allows you to use time. You get the value of time, and time is your most precious resource. Each day that goes by, each minute, each second that goes by, you will never get it back, but money you can make and lose. So I wish a few years ago I had invested in a 12-month business program. The business program was being offered, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do it. The reason was silly, because another accountant I knew was already doing the program. And I thought, well, I'll do it next year, so then I might be the only accountant in the program. Just stupid. The stuff that I've learned in that course, and I've done about 8 or 9 different courses with different people to learn everything that I can about business, has revolutionized how I think. And because of that, I can earn more and be a better leader and treat my team better and get the most out of my team and out of my clients, so that we both get results quicker. So education is key. Of course, taking action is better than education, of course. Health and relationships are key. You will have a miserable life if your health is failing and your relationships are failing. And when your health and relationships are not in balance and aligned, it can take so much time and cause so much pain. So please don't forget, no matter all of this other stuff about making wealth and business and property, relationships and health are the most important things. Aside from perhaps your values, yeah, there it is again. Time is your most precious commodity. The definition of luck, this was in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. The definition of luck is, they define it as preparedness plus opportunity. And I love this, because opportunities come up all the time, but opportunities are not always offered to everyone. And opportunities have an amazing potential, and you have to be prepared to have that opportunity. So there are certain people like Elon Musk who invest in PayPal and SpaceX. He had the preparedness of being willing and ready to engage in business. He had the opportunity to invest in PayPal, and that was really lucky that he had that preparedness and opportunity and worked hard at it, and that means luck. Rupert Murdoch bought what was MySpace, that's what it's called. I think he bought MySpace for $530 million, and maybe it was 35. Anyway, he lost. That's right. Bought it for 530. He sold it for 20 or 30 million, and that is a massive loss. But Rupert Murdoch has made many, many gains and has been exceptionally lucky in his career and made billions because he has the opportunity and the preparedness. So even though for him MySpace was a terrible investment and he shouldn't have made it, he made he made the best of that luck by taking advantage of that opportunity. Even though it was the wrong opportunity, we're all going to make mistakes. But Rupert Murdoch has the ability to make a $500 million mistake, and because of that, he is able to be more lucky. Now, not suggesting that you invest in MySpace. Now, but investing in $500 million, that's maybe a bit beyond us. Let's talk about your career. I think there are two options with a job. One is to have a job that pays you great, that you can live a passionate life. You may not love your job, but you're skilled in it. You can do it well. Maybe you can do it without thinking. And that allows you to have great holidays or spend more time with your family or just work the 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever it is, and then be able to switch off and then give your family and your kids a wonderful experience of growing up. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to have a job that you are skilled at and get paid and you can live a passionate life. The option two is to have a job that you're passionate about that allows you to live. So this might be working for a church or charity or community or passion project or starting your own business. You get to be 100% you and you get to do it. It doesn't mean that you're going to love every day. It means you can still get depressed. It means you can still find things challenging. Business and jobs and these passion projects can be a roller coaster. But you earn enough that allows you to live, and then you're doing something that inspires you, that you're passionate about. So I suggest either one of these is what you're aiming for. And if there's no way forward for you to get to those places, as in option one, a job that pays you well, that you can live a passionate life, or option two, a job that allows you to live that you're passionate about, then I think you should get off or plan to get off. That might be by retraining. It might be to getting another job in the same industry where you're paid a bit more so that you can be passionate about it. Don't stay in a job that is not going anywhere, that you've got terrible managers. It just does something to you. And I stayed too long in a job before. I've worked in two environments where I found it extrememely frustrating. And that comes out on my wife and my daughter. When I'm frustrated at work, it is impossible for us as humans to completely switch off or not let things affect us. We are human beings. We're emotional. Things affect us. And I think that the best way to have a long and prosperous and happy and successful life is doing something that you are happy to do and also being treated with respect, because that allows you to treat yourself with respect. So there are many bad bosses out there, and that's the key reason why people leave companies. It's because of bad management or bad leadership, and there is nothing wrong with that, and it is not you. You are a fantastic person and a wonderful worker, and you have the ability to give so much into a business as an employee or as an owner. So I want to encourage you to try to, if this, where you are isn't a fit, I encourage you to try to make the best of it. And then if it still doesn't work, then to move on. So the best way to get praise, a good job recommendation, a salary increase, a promotion increase, to do better work, more of the work you love in your job, is to be the person your boss wants you to be. Your boss wants someone who is proactive, who works in the way that they want to work and does what they want them to do. But also they probably want someone who is thinking ahead and thinking to help them. And I had the problem of giving too many ideas and trying to have my employee jobs work how I wanted to do, with a customer-centric focus. And so some of my ideas were also a bit revolutionary, a bit too forward for their time. I suggested that at my first job, make videos to train the staff how to do it. And I even did a series of 6 videos to explain how we drafted invoices for clients and added up all the timesheets. And even though those videos were probably watched 25 times by different staff that I was training, and it leveraged my time, it wasn't something for the business, and they weren't ready for that. Obviously they wish they had done it. I've heard both a few people from that company who I gave that idea to said, "Oh, I wish we'd done that back then." But it doesn't matter whether your company or job will see what you see as potential. Just trying to work for your boss and for your company in the best way, I think, is the best way to progress your career, whether in your current company or with another one. There's a big thing that business owners and running a business is revered, and there's a big status about, I own my own business. But I think it is wonderful to have a job, because as a business owner, you get paid last. You've got all the stress of the business. To be an employee, you can more easily borrow to buy property or invest in other people's businesses. You have less stress because it's not your responsibility, and it enables security that allows you to have a wonderful family life, keep healthy, look after yourself, and do the things that are important to you. So I've been on both sides of the fence, and both are good and both can be terrible. But a business owner has a lot more stress and a lot more responsibility than an employee. It is not necessarily better to be a business owner. There are 4 levers for wealth, which I'm going to talk about now. Number 1 is property. Number 2 is business. Number 3 is equities, which might be shares or managed funds or other investments that are someone else's business or property, generally. Or there's a few other types of assets that are out there that I'll talk about later. And the 4th lever for wealth is maybe insurance or family inheritance or winnings, something that just kind of happens. The 4th lever, I've heard only 3 described, but I think there is a 4th one where you can have money brought into you that's not because of property or business or someone else's business, that just happens because of something that's happened to you. And I think that you may not be able to manufacture number 4. I mean, I suppose you could marry the right person, but I generally focus on 1, 2, and 3, and then trying to use, if number 4 happens, that's great. Trying to use that, trying to put that money in the best way into perhaps one of the other levers. Let's talk about property. I bought my first property at 23, and I could have potentially bought it earlier. I purchased a car because my dad said, "Hey, if you save up to $5,000 for a car, I'll put in up to $5,000." So I bought a car for $10,500, and I put in $5,500. He put in $5,000. I wish that I had purchased an investment property. So setting up a savings plan, a budget, sacrificing now might be for 2 or 3 years, might only be for 6 months. Sacrificing so that you can buy your first property is key to wealth, and doing that as soon as possible. You maybe have a few properties, you may have a home that you're paying off. You've started that journey. There's still no harm in sacrificing and creating a savings plan or budget so that you can better invest your money later. People do get a bit, not lazy, but they get a bit complacent with the money they earn. I do it as well. It's easy to spend money, and when it comes in, it's easy for it to go dissipate through your fingers. But if there is a savings plan or a budget, or simply you do something like pay yourself first, you pay yourself 10% of what you make into a separate account, and then you don't touch that account until you invest it. That's another one from The Richest Man in Babylon. That will have so much compounding benefits, and the earlier and the more that you do it early has compounding benefits later. I think in property it is better to make money than to save tax. So there are concessions. If you buy your own home, then it can be potentially capital gains tax free. But I think just generally it is better to purchase an investment property where you might be able to borrow sooner, buy an investment property for a lower amount than living where you want to live, buying investment property that you're getting tax benefits, you can pay off the loan quicker or purchase another one. I think it's much better to have investment properties, which you'll need to pay capital gains on when you sell, than it is to have a home that grows in value and you save tax if you're going to sell, but you don't end up making as much money because you just have the one home and it might not go up in value as much, or you wait too long to purchase it. Often that's the main thing, that people want $1 million house, and so they need to save for 5 years to be able to afford that. Whereas if they had purchased a $300,000 investment property or $300,000 to $500,000 investment property, that property could have itself increased in value by $150,000 in the time that it's taken them to save, and that money could be borrowed, remortgaged, and the increase in the equity could be used as a deposit for their home or another investment property. So being able to re-borrow on equity is one of the greatest things in the Australian and world. It is using other people's money and the increase in money that you're not taxed on. So it is much better to make money than to save tax. So buying an investment property first, or buying investment properties, or borrowing to invest, it has its benefit, it has its limitations, and it is, if you borrow money and it goes against you, that's very serious because it's leverage. Leverage means you're doing more with less. So when you have leverage and you lose money, you lose more money. So it's not perfect leverage, and there's always a risk, and things are more risks when they're more leveraged, but just in general, to try to make money rather than save tax. So if you live in a property first as your principal place of residence, you can leave it completely and rent out the whole property for up to 6 years and sell it within that 6 years and get a capital gains tax exemption, so you're not taxed on any gains. After the 6 years, you start to apply the market value when you first started renting it out. So this strategy doesn't work if you buy a place, live in it for 3 to 6 months, then rent it out for 6 years and 1 day. You're really back to where you started from. You haven't got any exemption of capital gains. You're back to the market value when you first rented it out, which may actually be less than what you purchased the property for plus your costs. So you may actually have more tax to pay. But this can be a great strategy if, for example, you've lived in a property for 5 years or however long and it's increased in value. Then you could move out and then rent out the whole property for up to 6 years and sell it within that time, or move back in. You can only have one property at a time, and you can only have one property per couple. So it is a limited strategy, but it is a great strategy that my clients employ. But again, as I said before, you may want to ignore that strategy and just consider buying and having investment properties, because it's better to make money than to save tax. I call these buying monopoly properties. When I was 18, I went on a bus trip to country towns, and these guys were selling these properties for 160 or 200 grand in Orange and Wellington. And it turns out they're actually scammers. You know, like my dad and I stayed overnight with them, this group bus tour, and we played cards with the guys. And later it turned out, I don't know how we knew this, but maybe we saw it on the news a year later, but they were optioning the properties from the owner, and then on selling the option. So they'd option the property. They'd say, I'll buy your property. I have the option to buy your property for 160 grand, and I'll give you $500 for that right, because it's only worth 150. And then they'd flip it on to an investor for 180. And then they would have made 30 grand less the 500 they paid. And the investor has got something that's 30 grand or more expensive than they should have had. And even though it's cash flow positive and it makes money, returns cash flow, it is not going to increase in value. So generally, capital growth will have the biggest impact to your wealth, and also capital growth in a property can be borrowed against and to buy another property, so long as you have the serviceability to the cash flow to borrow against and buy another property. So capital growth and development potential beats short-term income. So ideally you have both. And one property guru has a system where you might buy one initially for cash flow. You might buy initially for capital gains, one or two of them. Then you might be able to convert your property to have more than one person living in it. That's a specific strategy that someone teaches. And then you've got more cash flow, or you buy a cash flow positive property, which could be commercial or a high income, high yield property. And then you've got the serviceability, and then you can go again to borrow another capital growth property. So, but if you were to only buy one type of property, you would buy capital growth properties, not cash flow positive, because the short-term income, let's say, you make $3,000 a year net on your property, that's going to be taxed at your marginal rate. You're going to probably fritter away that money. And also, once you spend the income from the property, it's gone. Whereas the capital growth means that a $300,000 or $400,000 property could become a $550,000 property, and you've not spent any of that money because it doesn't exist. It's just the value of the property, but you can borrow against it to buy more assets. And then once you sell it, you've got the 550 grand less what you paid. So it's kind of a forced savings, and you're earning this money tax free, which means you're better off by, at least 19%, but in some people's cases, 32.5%, 37 or 45% or more better off, because you're not paying tax on the income, and you kind of can't touch it and you can't get at it, and you can use it to buy assets. So capital growth is so much more important than short-term income, and capital growth comes best from location and valuable properties that people want to buy, or things that you can add value to, like a property on a big set of land, make it into a duplex, build a set of units on it. Now that's an experienced strategy, but if you have that land that someone else wants to build on, you have an asset that someone else can buy from you, or you could, joint venture or engage a builder or whatever it is, or deal with a property manager or buyer's agent who has that expertise. If you have something that everyone wants, you've got a lot more leverage than if you have something that is a new apartment of which there's 48 in the block, and then someone else sells it for 50 grand less. Suddenly they're all worth 50 grand less in the buyer's minds because they've just seen one sell. So I sold our first unit at 50 grand less than I thought it was worth, and it was probably worth that a year later, because it wasn't in demand. And if it was a house, I think it would have been very different. But because it was a unit, it wasn't in demand, and there were existing ones that were very similar. So it was a challenge to even sell it. So new property versus old. New property gives more tax benefits. You can get depreciation on all of the building costs over 40 years. That's claimable at 2.5% a year over 40 years of all of the building costs, except for some things like landscaping and the land cost. But the actual cost of the building, the kitchen cabinets, the floorboards, the building, that is all deductible over 40 years. And if it's a new property, you also get to claim the value of anything added in that is not a building, like carpets, blinds, that, they might have kitchen fittings like a dishwasher that you can claim depending on what you bought. And versus an older property where you can get a depreciation report, but you are limited to claim only the building works. So for example, the part of the floorboards or the kitchen reno or the bathroom reno, and you can't claim the dishwasher that's already in there, or the carpet or the blinds. So even though there's lots more tax benefits for new property, I still think that older properties in better areas can give more capital gains, and also may or may not require less maintenance. Just because they've made it newer doesn't mean that it's a high quality build, and there is plenty of builders that cut corners will do things to standard, but it's built for a 20-year project. It's built for 20 years rather than being built for 100 years. I think we see this with Apple phones or Samsung phones. Mobile phones are built for 2 years or 3 years. That's the life of the phone, and they know that people are using them and they're eventually going to get rid of them. As opposed to apartments and houses in the 70s or the 50s or the 1900s, they were built to last. I don't know if that many developments are built to last like older properties are. So it's great to get those tax benefits, and it makes a massive difference. But my leaning is towards an older property where you can build on it or you can do the work if that is possible. But people who aren't interested at all, I'm not against people buying new properties because of the tax benefits, and then that extra tax saving can be used for other things. But yeah, my preference would be older properties that have potential. So houses or units? Units allow you to live near the city and buy something, and you have less maintenance, so you're just paying your strata costs. Whereas houses, you're going to pay more land tax eventually, but there's just more potential for making profit. But you could develop the house. You may not be able to develop the house now, but if you buy something that later the rules change in 5 or 10 years, you're sitting on an asset that you can one day do something with. And as I said before, uniqueness is what makes things worth a lot of money. A painting could be worth $5 or it could be worth 30 million. It is the uniqueness and the specialty of the artist and the artwork that makes it valuable. And property is something in the same way. The more people that want something, the more it is valued, and the more uniqueness or something can be made with it or something can be made special, it's more likely to be more valued. So townhouses are likely to be valued higher than units. They've got more space. There might be a smaller development. So buying something in a smaller development if you're buying units and that has some specialty appeal. But generally, I think houses, there's a lot more you can do with houses. And I mentioned earlier that there might be the potential even to convert a house into having more than one tenancy in certain ways. You've got to make sure that you do the right things and you're legal with council and all of that. Everyone can buy a property, but a buyer's agent who knows about development and capital growth of the area and negotiation can do a much better deal. And I've bought my own properties in the past. So it was property number 3 that we engaged a buyer's agent, and I'm not sure I'm going to go back. I've had a client who bought 4 properties, and he's like, look, I don't see the value of the buyer's agent because I can just look at the hotspots from that someone tells you about, and then I can go and negotiate myself. And I don't disagree with him. I think he can do a good job. And he had a job, so he had a high-earning job, and he could also devote his other time to negotiating the next property deal. Whereas for me, as someone who runs a business and has a family and has less time, I'm much more inclined to use the expertise of the right property buying agent. Business. All right. I have made so many mistakes in my business. I've had my own tax agency for 10 years. I used to have a blog. I tried to make money out of that, but I just decided I love helping people with their tax and their mindset and their business and being their advisor. So this is what I've stuck with. And I kind of fell into this when I was in high school because I heard about you could do an accounting cadetship and do uni part-time and work full-time and then get your degree. And I was already planning. What I wanted to do was do marketing at uni and then keep my supermarket and restaurant jobs. And I just thought, well, no, this is a much better way to get experience. And I'm so glad for the experience that I had. But there's so many things that I didn't learn about business until I ran my own business. So business owners need to focus on customers first and marketing and sales, because the more customers you have and the more people that you can provide a good experience to so they tell other people, that is how a business grows and thrives. And after those things are optimized, which may be a forever pursuit a Harbour Bridge pursuit for the business owner, like the Harbour Bridge, they continue painting it every day because there's a part that they paint all the time. because by the time they finish painting it, they need to start again. But if you've optimized customers, marketing and sales in your business, then you can optimize the delivery of what they get, the finance of how the business functions, and the people. And people are the most important asset of a business because they can help pull all the other systems of the business and make the business work in the best way. Know your numbers. This is part of what I help business owners do, is knowing their numbers, knowing what they've made, what they've spent, what it costs them to make a sale, the lifetime value of their customers. People don't understand when they're advertising. You know, they might spend $100 on advertising to get a customer, and then that customer spends $100 and they go, well, that's a waste of time. I won't do that anymore. But if the customer spends $100 today and then in 3 months spends another 100, and then the total value of that customer is $4,000, then of course it's worth spending $100 to fund them straight up, as long as you can fund until they start to make you money. And if you can fund a marketing campaign that starts to make you money from day one, or day 10, if it pays for itself, or in some way you can use the increased customers and referrals from customers to make more money, then you can keep advertising and keep growing and keep scaling. There's much more to it, because obviously once you get to a certain point, and time being the most precious commodity, the business owner doesn't have any more time left. So you need to know when to build the team and building the systems, but as a first step, focusing on sales, focusing on customer delivery, and then sales, and then marketing are key for small business owners to grow their business. And knowing your numbers is a key part of that. Investments and super. So there's only so many types of assets. There's so many structured and complicated ways that things are invested in. But I think the main types are, if you're investing in something, it's going to in some way be cash, or a bond, which is loaning money to someone. Businesses, other people's property, like Westfield. You can invest in Westfield and they own property. Physical assets, which might be like gold. Commodities like soybeans. Or there are things called derivatives or insurance, where you can bet on the outcome of all of the above. And I've lost a lot of money share trading. I lost about 40 grand in a month when I was doing a particular complex share trading type strategy. It was called, I was doing covered calls, US CFD covered calls, and naked puts. And you know, if you know what that is, you will know why I lost money. But the market decides what something is worth based today on what they think the future is going to happen. Traders and computers auto trades change that dramatically. So if a market is tending up, then computers might jump on and buy it, or banks, institutions might jump on and buy it. So even though there's a share market and there's an exchange where people buy things, and it's you think that the market price is what it is actually a lot deeper than that, because there's a lot of people betting and trying to make money on what's happening, and there's a lot of even computers that are trying to make money from banks. So fear and greed and computers are the two main things that drive markets, and fear inspires immediate action. So when I was learning this in an investment course, the guy said, okay, I'm going to pretend something. I'm going to pretend that you've got $100 under your seat. Have a look and see who's going to get that $100. And people weren't that interested. A lot of people didn't even bother reaching under their seat. And then he said, now this is only pretend. I'm not going to say this happened. But he said, okay, what if there's a fire? And then if there is a fire, people would immediately get up from their seats and run out the door. He didn't try the exercise. He didn't fool us. But fear is a powerful motivator and inspires immediate action, versus greed or self-interest or making money. It's a much less powerful. It exists, and it's an emotion that drives markets, but it doesn't inspire immediate action. So, but when shares are falling and people are losing money, people are afraid of loss and they have a fear of loss. So they're much more likely to make rash decisions like selling out. So that's the time that you can make money in markets. But also, just because you think it's a good time to buy, the market might not agree with you, and markets don't follow the rules. And that's the key thing, is that even though something might be worth on paper and have a price earnings ratio that's great and whatever, markets don't follow rules because there are people who are emotionally driven and there are computers that are driven by other factors. So if you expect the market to be fair and follow rules or be logical, it is not, and you will lose money. So the share market is ridiculously more volatile than property, because even though property goes up and down, you have to sell it. You have to sell a property, and then it might take 6 weeks to settle. Unlike a share market where anyone can sell a certain amount of shares every day, provided there's a buyer. So that volatility can be your friend, but it can also hurt you. And knowing that the share market is volatile, you have your superannuation in there automatically. But every period that you are buying superannuation, you are buying equities and property every time your superannuation goes in. And that is actually a benefit. It's called dollar cost averaging, because if something goes down, you buy more items of it. You know, if your managed fund that you're buying into for your superannuation is $5 a unit and you have $500, you're going to buy 100 units. If that goes down to $1 the next month, you're going to buy 100 units, but you're going to buy, if the price is $5 versus $1, you're going to buy 5 times the amount. And one day it might come back to $3, and your cost when you buy more when the price is lower is lower. So that's called dollar cost averaging, as in the lower the price, the more you buy. And if it goes back up again, that has a great value. Or if you keep buying when the price is less, then you can buy a lot more. So obviously it doesn't work if the price keeps going down, but dollar cost averaging means that the price, even though the price started at $5, if then it goes down and then it comes back a little bit, you can still make money doing it. So don't be worried about share market volatility if you've got time. And that's the problem with investing and short-term investing and trying to make a quick buck. You can lose money very quickly and you don't have time to make it back. So I did some options trading and some shares even when I was 17, and then I left my money in cash before I bought my property at 23 for a while. Like, I lost some money on shares even back then. I didn't lose too much though, maybe $1,000. So I talked to the financial planners in my office and they're like, look, you don't have time for the market to go against you because you're wanting to buy a property. So just sit in cash. And that's what I did. And that is good advice, because you can't lose money on cash unless the banks crash, which is unlikely in Australia. So the wonderful thing about Australian shares is that they can pay fully franked dividends, which means the company tax has already been paid and you can receive a credit of that tax. And if your tax rate's high, you'll pay the top-up tax, the difference. But you can't even receive a credit for these tax credits that the company tax is paid. So when you get into a super fund and you're paying no tax because you're retired and you're getting these company tax credits, that is a wonderful thing. And they've talked about taking them away. So it is possible that won't always exist, but as of now, it does. So this is comparing a retail super fund versus a self-managed super fund. A retail super fund, or retail or wholesale, or any of those type of super funds, have a percentage of fees for administration and investment. They don't give you tax planning, but that's not as important when you're younger, and they're better for lower balances, and everyone has one to start off with. A self-managed super fund, you need to get advice generally to set one up. They're more work. You the trustees, who might be a company, or the members of the super fund, are liable if something happens. But you have more choice. You've got to decide what you're going to invest in. And with an SMSF, you can have fixed admin fees, meaning that you pay for your accounting and the audit and the ATO supervisor levy, and you can, of course, pay for investment fees on top of that. But the larger your super balance is, the overall lower amount you're probably going to be paying to have an SMSF, as opposed to a retail or wholesale super fund. And an SMSF allows you to do a lot more with it, like invest in property or an unrelated business. You can't necessarily have your self-managed super fund buy shares in your own business. There's something called non-arm's length income that means that kind of money is taxed at 45%, rather than normally a super fund is taxed at 15% of taxable income, 10% on capital gains that have been held for more than 1 year, as in what they get is a 1/3 discount in a self-managed super fund if it's been held more than a year. For an individual, that's a 50% discount if it's held more than a year. And on retirement, there is, when the super fund goes into pension phase, there is 0% tax on both the earnings of the fund and the capital gains of the fund. And it is possible to have both money in pension phase and also some money in accumulation phase, which is taxed at 15%. Because once your super fund is in pension phase, you need to start drawing down from the pension. And that pension is tax-free as an individual. And they changed these rules back in 2007, 2008, and it was ridiculous. And I just think they shot themselves in the foot, because there was all this tax income from retirees that they're not getting. Superannuation is still the biggest tax loophole that exists, and I think it makes sense to utilize that loophole as much as possible, as it makes sense for your circumstances. Like, you want to buy a house for your family to live in, you want to live a good life. So you don't want to just not live until you're 60 and then be wealthy. You want to have fun now and be able to use your money to do things that make you happy and fulfill your purpose and your family and your relationships, and keep your health and all of these things I've talked about. But superannuation is a massive tax concession that is designed for retirement, and currently the rules for retirees are very good. All right, family and insurance. Family trusts allow income to be earned in a vehicle that can be distributed in a certain way. A self-managed super fund, or any super fund for that matter, is also a form of trust that has specific requirements, like you have to meet a condition of release to be able to obtain your super money. So the family trust tax-free amounts at the moment this is in the 2020 financial year. There's $416 per year that you can give to each child. There's $20,541 that each adult can earn tax-free. There is $28,974 for a senior couple that they each can earn tax-free. There is $32,279 that a single senior person can earn tax-free. Now, of course, if you have a family trust in your business that owns the shares and then distributes to your in-laws, that may or may not work as a strategy, because they may have an age pension for Centrelink, and then that may reduce their age pension. So these strategies don't always work, and you need to have advice to work out the best optimal thing for your family. But it is strange to me that I have these conversations many times with people, and they would pick up, if $200 was on the street, they would pick it up and they would be so happy, and they'd buy a lottery ticket, and that would have made their month. But when I talk to them about ways of saving hundreds and sometimes thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, they're like, the government might change the rules, or I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't know enough about it, so I don't want to do it. So I think the advice to get set up correctly can save you a lot of tax over the years if you are doing things in the right way. And typically family trusts can be used for business or investment purposes. There are some businesses that run as trusts. There are some businesses that run as companies with shareholders as trusts. So trusts aren't great for the tax office. They do know that trusts are a tax advantage vehicles and they don't love them. Banks don't love trust structures because they're a bit more complicated and every trust relies on the deed. But for the tax benefits and the flexibility of trusts, they are a wonderful vehicle to be used where appropriate, and also they can be very protected. I can't give legal advice. I can't give financial advice. None of this thing in this video is advice. You need to seek advice that relates to your own personal circumstances. So I also want to talk about insurance. I've got here some of the main types of personal insurance. There is life insurance that pays out if you pass away. It's called TPD, trauma and permanent disability insurance. They can also be split up. You can just have trauma insurance separately. There is income protection insurance that is often tax deductible. And there is your private health insurance. And of course, there's every other type of insurance, like car insurance, travel insurance, caravan insurance, lender's mortgage insurance, consumer credit insurance. If there is something that wrong that could happen to you, there is an insurance that you can pay for to protect it. Warren Buffett made his money, a lot of it, by owning an insurance company because insurance is a cash cow. People pay all of this money, and if you get it right, nothing happens to them. Yet your premium's right. The claims that you have to pay are less than the premiums you get in, and it just makes money. And Warren Buffett made all his money, cash flow from insurances, and then invested that into other cleverly run businesses, and then he's become a billionaire. So insurance, a lot of insurance, the money that you pay is wasted because you don't claim off it, but at the same time, the benefits to your family or yourself and your state of mind, if something does happen and you have the appropriate insurance and advice in place, that can be a wonderful peace of mind. And I've seen clients who have and hadn't had insurance and what it's meant for them. Even you can be well off and have insurance. Wealthy people do have insurance. And I had a couple who earned quite good salaries, but the wife had a car accident and she was able to earn income protection insurance. She was able to receive an income, and that allowed her to take the time before she got back to work. And could they have afforded to live with just his salary? They probably could have. He earned a very good salary, but it just meant that she had the peace of mind that she could recover at her own place, and that didn't affect any of the other goals that they had. So it's funny that people will pay $600 for car insurance and they might get 15 grand if they write off their car, but they won't necessarily want to pay $2,000 a year, which then they would receive $800,000 if they were in some way deceased. So I just leave that as a bit of a funny sticking point that things like car and travel insurance, they will have a maximum payout. And these things often have like an extreme excess and they're difficult to claim on and all of this. But having the right advice and insurance, you will have some insurance usually in superannuation, but whether it can be hard to claim on and whether it is enough for your personal circumstances, I really recommend that you consider speaking to an insurance specialist or a financial planner to find the best policies that protect you and your family in your budget and fights for you if there is a claim, because that's what these guys do. If there is a claim to be made, they help make the claim so that you don't have to fight with the insurance company. Thanks so much for listening. There's quite a lot in there. I'm always free to give more. Please let me know if there's questions you have about what you've heard, and love to help more. So, you can book a time to speak with me and let's help you grow your wealth and protect your family and do more of what you want to do. Thanks.